How's it going, everybody? I'm Dave Glavin, an aspiring NBA salary cap strategist, and today I'll be discussing the Detroit Pistons' outlook ahead of the trade deadline, as well as analyzing how potential additions would affect their playoff rotation and future financial commitments this offseason. After my last video, I was initially going to do a trade deadline primer for the entire league, but I opted to do a few team-specific analyses instead, so I could go a bit more in depth into the moves themselves. So let's jump right into it. The Pistons are 31-10. They're atop the Eastern Conference with a 5.5 game lead over the second place Boston Celtics, who they beat last night. They're 11th in offensive rating and second in defensive rating. As far as their four factors offensively, they're top 3 in offensive rebound percentage and top 10 in free throw rate, while being below average in effective field goal percentage and bottom 5 in turnover percentage. On the defensive end, they have the best defensive effective field goal percentage in the league, and they're second in turnover percentage, while being below average in opponent offensive rebound percentage and having the worst opponent free throw rate in the league. Some miscellaneous team stats: they're top 3 in points off of turnovers and fast break points. So they really use their defense to generate offense. And they're bottom 5 in three-pointers made and free throw percentage, as well as leading the league in steals and blocks per game. They only have 2 lineups with over 100 possessions played, which speaks to their depth and lineup malleability this season. They have 32 different combinations with over 25 possessions played. But those 2 with over 100 are Cade Cunningham, Thompson, Duncan Robinson, Tobias Harris, and Jalen Duren. And then Isaiah Stewart in place of Tobias Harris for that second lineup. The first one, their starters, plus 10.2 net rating. And then the second lineup with Stewart instead of Harris, plus 6.9 net rating. As far as their on-off numbers, they're led by Cade, plus 6.5 net rating per 100 possessions. Jalen Duren at 5.5, Paul Reed at 5, Ron Holland 4.5, and Dennis Jenkins 4.5 as well. Their bottom 3 are Isaiah Stewart minus 5, Tobias Harris minus 5.4, and Karis LeVert minus 8.7 points per 100 possessions. The goal at this deadline, in my opinion, is to add 3-point shooting while maintaining future financial flexibility. In terms of their roster, they have a full team. 15 slots are filled, as well as all 3 two-ways. They're about $19 million below the luxury tax, which is essentially a hard cap for them. They're not going to go into the tax this season. They have 4 tradable first-round picks, as well as 16 second-round picks that they can use. In terms of expiring contracts, Tobias Harris at about $26.5 million, Jaden Ivey at just above $10 million, Jalen Duren $6.5 million, Javonte Green at the minimum $2.2 million, $2.3 million roughly, and Isaac Jones at just under $2 million. In terms of at-risk exceptions, they haven't used the biannual exception, which is just above $5 million. They have until the end of the season to use that, and that can be used as a trade exception. They also have a Dennis Schroeder trade exception that they generated this past summer at the start of the new league year. They will have technically until this league year ends to use it, but their best opportunity to bring a guy in to impact the team this year, obviously, is at the deadline. As far as their roadmap, this has been another impressive leap for a group who's not too far removed from losing 28 games in a row. JB Bickerstaff is the odds-on favorite for Coach of the Year, and it's well-deserved. They hang their hat on the defensive end, and honestly might have overtaken the Thunder as the most physical team in the league. Over the last 2 weeks, their 96 defensive rating is 10 points per 100 possessions better than the second-place team. However, they rank 27th in offensive rating over that same stretch, which is a bit concerning. And how they can improve on that end without sacrificing their defensive intensity will be the focus of my analysis today. They often go 10 or 11 deep, so I'd also like to discuss how their rotation will shrink come playoff time, especially with any potential additions. In their first-round series against the Knicks last year, they played 9 guys, and it's important to note Ivy and Stewart did not play in that series, and a third of that rotation is no longer with the team. Tim Hardaway Jr., Dennis Schroeder, and Malik Beasley all departed this offseason. They added Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert to help with some of that loss in shot creation and shooting. But I still think they need to target three-point shooting at the deadline. They're 26th in three-pointers made per game this season as opposed to 20th last year. I understand with the way this team is built, they're going to rely on threes less than other teams, really most teams in the modern NBA. But with 4 of their 5 starters being below average to non-three-point shooting threats, I do think they need some reinforcements, especially Cade's at his best when he's able to drive and kick to open shooters. Another goal at the deadline, or really for the rest of the season, is to create a roster spot to convert Dennis Jenkins to a standard contract. He's been really impactful for them on a two-way and has 20 games of NBA eligibility left, which if he were to play their next 20 games would bring him to March 5th against San Antonio. That would be his last eligible game to be on a two-way. They don't necessarily have to make a trade as they have that financial flexibility below the tax to waive a player, and they have until the end of the regular season to convert him. But if the opportunity presents itself to open up a roster spot in a trade, I think they should take it. I'm going to highlight one trade target for Detroit, as well as discuss a few options that they have to convert Jenkins. And I'll finish off by talking about how these moves would affect their playoff rotation. And Luke Kennard stands out to me as a potential fit for this Detroit team. And I think there's a few reasons why, starting with why Atlanta would want to get rid of him. I think the recent acquisition of Corey Kispert and the emergence of Vit Krejci has made Kennard expendable, especially from an asset management perspective. He's on an expiring contract, nearing 30 years old, and I think they'd be able to get some value for him. Detroit's going to want him because he's an all-time great shooter, shooting the cover off the ball this year, 48% from three. He's been in Detroit before. I think he started there, and he knows his role as a veteran. In this deal, I have them sending out Marcus Sasser to Atlanta. He's been unable to crack the rotation due to Jaden Ivey's return and Dennis Jenkins' emergence. And Atlanta would also receive a 2027 Detroit second and a 2028 Miami second. As far as financial impact, Detroit's adding a little bit over $8 million here, leaving them about $11 million below the tax. They do clear Sasser's $5.2 million for next season, which would leave them with almost $40 million in cap space. They would have Kennard's non-bird rights, which would limit them to signing him to 120% of his current salary, which is about $13.2 million. That's the max they could give him next year with 5% maximum raises. Let's look at the long-term financial impact of acquiring Kennard. If he were to get that full amount, a new 2-year, $27 million deal with a team option in year 2. This contract would leave them with 5 open roster spots, about $62 million below the tax to work with to re-sign Harris, Duren, and Ivey. This is before accounting for a Dennis Jenkins conversion. Kennard would need to be signed first as they have bird rights on the other 3, so they can go over the cap to sign those guys. I'm going to pencil in deals for those 3 as well as an assumed new contract for Jenkins, as this video is not as focused on specific average annual value negotiations, but more on just how they could all fit if they were to look to extend Kennard long term. Duren bet on himself this season, and it's paid off. He's likely headed for his first All-Star game and a contract in the high 20s or low 30s in terms of average annual value. I'll project him at a 4-year, $120 million deal with flat $30 million cap hits, similar to what Jalen Johnson got over 5 seasons. Tobias Harris is headed for a pay cut. I think a structure similar to Kennard's potential deal with a team option in year 2, 5% raise, but at the full non-tax mid-level is fair given his age. And it does provide Detroit with some flexibility if he declines further and or if they want to extend him at a lower number after next season. They'll unlock access to the non-tax mid-level after signing Duren in this scenario. Ivey is an interesting case. They really started to take off last season after he got hurt. Not that those two are related, but he's been unable to get that same burst back that really made him who he is as a player since that injury, which was a broken leg. Like, it's understandable. And he's developed into a better shooter, but I think Detroit's going to need a bigger sample size to warrant giving him a long-term deal. Funny enough, I think he would be a good flyer in restricted free agency for a team like Atlanta. But if there were no other suitors, I could see a return on the qualifying offer with a waived implicit no trade clause. I think that could make sense for both sides. And I also projected Jenkins at 2 years, $2.4 million, which goes off the assumption that they waive Isaac Jones on March 2nd to sign Jenkins on March 4th. I picked those specific dates because it allows Detroit to maximize Jenkins' two-way eligibility while also letting Jones clear the 48-hour waivers before the March 4th two-way signing deadline, where he could rejoin the team on a two-way contract. I'm pretty sure I did that math correctly and that's allowed. But please correct me if I'm wrong if they're not able to re-sign him after waiving him. These moves are probably on the team-friendly side. I have that mocked out here. I just wanted to illustrate the long-term impact of a Kennard acquisition, given that they do have some significant upcoming free agents. They would end up about $1,000 short of the luxury tax. Obviously, do not want to be this close, but just again, I'm estimating here with one open roster spot, and they would be hard capped at the first apron for using the non-tax mid-level. This also gives them financial flexibility in 2027-28 to stay below the tax, even with a new deal for Asar Thompson. They'll have Karis LeVert coming off the books that year as well, and Paul Reed, as well as team options potentially on Tobias Harris, Isaiah Stewart, Luke Kennard, and Ron Holland. Ron Holland will obviously be guaranteed there. Duncan Robinson also has non-guarantees in his deal next season and the year after. Back to the original trade talk. I think Atlanta, while they'll be getting cost savings this season, I could see them being hesitant to take back Sasser's future salary, just given that they're projected to have almost $40 million in cap space as well this summer after trading Trae Young. They do get 2 second-round picks as compensation, and if they don't feel like they're getting fair value for Kennard, they could negotiate for some of Detroit's more favorable projected seconds, like the 2027 Milwaukee or some of the later Milwaukee picks that they could potentially have in 2029. Or they could ask for Javonte Green instead of Marcus Sasser, as he makes a similar amount. He's right at the vet minimum, $2.3 million, but on an expiring deal. I don't think Detroit would be willing to include Green with multiple seconds, just given that he provides them with more wing depth in the event of an injury, and he's been contributing well recently. This deal would be structured as 2 separate trades with the league at least, so that both teams could take advantage of existing trade exceptions as well as create new ones. So in the first one, just as an example, it doesn't have to be structured this way, but Detroit takes Kennard in with the Dennis Schroeder trade exception, which would leave roughly $3 million left. That expires in the summer, and they send them the 2 second-round picks. With that, Atlanta would generate an $11 million trade exception for Kennard's salary. And the second trade could be Detroit sending Sasser to Atlanta, who would take him in using Cody Zeller trade exception that they have for about $3.5 million from last deadline. And they would have to send back either $110,000, which is the minimum in a trade, or a dummy top 55 protected second-round pick, as every team has to send or receive an asset or cash in a trade. And in that, Detroit would generate a $2.8 million trade exception for Sasser's salary. Taking a look at a potential playoff rotation, this is before any acquisitions, but with an assumed Jenkins conversion that's on the way. They'd have a 10-man rotation. I think I'm definitely being a little bit generous here to the back end of the rotation in terms of how many minutes they would actually get in a playoff series, especially, as you get further into the series and into elimination games. there's really 7, 8 guys on the floor max. You want your starters getting the most minutes. I think if Ivy's going to get significant minutes, I could see Dennis Jenkins being an odd one out here. Again, subbing patterns are not my forte. I was just trying to estimate player minute share and whose minutes a guy like Luke Kennard would take if they were to acquire him. I have that here as well. I think Karis LeVert's going to be a victim here if they do end up trying to get some bench shooting or bench scoring. They brought him in on the full non-tax mid-level this past off season to try to make up for the loss of Malik Beasley. And he really hasn't been able to deliver that same production, or really the production that they were expecting for that average annual value. So I could see him falling out of the rotation or really having his minutes reduced if they were to add somebody else. Other targets that stand out to me are Ayo Dosunmu and Svi Mikhailiuk. I think both of those guys, Svi's has 2 years left, both non-guaranteed, I believe, whereas Ayo is on a expiring contract, but they would have his bird rights if they traded for him. Not that many sellers in the league right now, or more so that the play-in has created false hope for people that think they have playoff chances that really should be selling. So I'm interested to see if that'll change over the next couple of weeks. I think that's definitely contributed to a slower trade market so far. But I appreciate anyone who tuned in, and I'm going to be back probably later this week with another team-specific analysis. I think it's valuable to look at not only how it affects the team this season, but also in future years, financially at least, with extensions and different things ahead when you're making a trade. Thank you.